Uh, I am not a technical wizard at any of this stuff, nor do I claim to be. I am a consultant that specializes in leadership uh, and particularly reinventing leadership to kind of get it ready for the future. So I am what you call, or what I call myself, as a leadership catalyst. And So I'm not here to educate leadership. I'm here to excite them about re-examining who they are and taking it to the next level because, my God, we need it. We need leadership. And the worst way right now, I am watching this war that's being waged, and it's like watching Barney Fife trying to, from Mayberry RFD, trying to control the world. And it's amazing. It's just amazing. Um, Leadership is something that is difficult. It's real. It has a significant impact on people and a significant impact on humanity and society in general. It is the lifeblood of all organizations, whether you're talking macro, like governments and world order, or whether you're talking about a restaurant on Main Street America. Uh, you can tell the difference between poor leadership and good leadership simply by sitting there observing what's going on. So if I'm I'm wondering what we're going to have to do that with in the near future when Larry Ellison takes over all of the legacy media. Excuse me, here I have allergies, so I will be itching my nose every now and then. I live in Oklahoma, a deep red state. I'm not a red person. I'm not any political person for that matter. But the uh, Oklahoma is known for its allergy issues. Of course, there's no trees, there's no major shrubbery to block anything that blows around here. So when the wind blows, like it has been the last couple of days, uh, and you happen to be someone who suffers from allergies, then you suffer from allergies. But the knowing the people in Oklahoma, there's an interesting dynamic. You would call them red, I guess, conservative people, but I'm not sure they're at all happy with their selection of president or any of the people he's put on the board. Not sure they're happy with our senators and our Congress people. Um, if if you there's a big difference if you talk to people who are into politics in Oklahoma and you talk to people who are just in to staying alive and living in Oklahoma. Right now, it's rated the lowest educational state in the country. It doesn't have a good crime rating. It's cost of living is probably less than most places, but that's because once you come out here and look around, it's kind of hard to want to come out here and live. There's no water anywhere, and what water you do find is natural. It's not clear water. It's red, murky water like the lakes. So it's one of those rare places. The people, the predominant thing about Oklahoma is oil and gas, and a lot of people work in that industry, and it provides a lot of opportunity for people. And I just did a post on my Substack on uh, oil and gas, and I consulted in that industry. I had the pleasure of consulting in it. What you find is you get to really see and understand the real people of Oklahoma. One of my best friends was in that business for years and years as an independent oil person, kind of like Billy Bob Thornton is. He's about that level, really. It was interesting. It's fun to watch that show, draw some of the parallels, but and some that aren't true. But uh, it is like all states. It has groups of people who care about each other and who are trying to survive and who are living on what they're fed by the people who run the state or run the politics of the state. And I think slowly but surely they're waking up to the fact that they've been, they definitely, at least the people I talk to on a regular basis, if you're talking to somebody who's here in Oklahoma, and when I talk to somebody, these are these are not people who are excited about what Trump is doing. This is not per se. I'd say they're probably more towards the Marjorie Taylor Greene group. Just totally disillusioned now because they can't probably grasp why things are the way they are in Oklahoma and the rest of the country for that matter. The fact that we're divided, I'm going to be 80 years old in July, so I've pretty much seen some pretty major transitions from the early 1960s or in the mid 1950s when I was a kid, just 12 to 16 in that area. Things were so much simpler, so much more relaxed, so much safer than they are now. Of course, I've seen us go through the flower days, hippie days, and the transition through the 60s and into the 70s. But I've also had an opportunity, having been in business since the early 70s, I've seen all of that transition, before there were computers, before there were anything thought about being a cell phone or smartphone, and now they call them. We didn't have those. People were talking to people. They weren't talking via what we're doing here now. You would be sitting at a coffee shop or a diner or McDonald's early in the morning with a bunch of people where you have coffee and just kind of get to know each other and things in common you start sharing and talking about what you can do and also complaining about everything. But the idea is you were complaining to someone sitting across from you. And it was a pretty consistent someone. I mean, you weren't talking to thousands and thousands of people. I can't imagine being on air and talking like one of the groups that I tend to watch because they are a pretty factual based and evidence based group. And that's important that when you're, as a communication person, someone who uses communication to build cultures and relationships and leadership, it's important you learn to differentiate the facts from the bullshit, and that's not an easy thing to do today. It's not an easy thing to do today because we have people now controlling what we used to trust as the people who were tasked with making sure things were factual and honest. That was a big part of it. I remember what was that, 50s and early 60s when the news departments of media organizations were money losers. They weren't the revenue generators they are today with massive cable networks everywhere. There were only like three, I think, major news television stations that people watch. They listen to radio, which has kind of fallen off to the wayside too. But these were the connections, and you trusted what you heard because they were held to standards that it was a big deal if somebody lied about something or tried to make something look good just to get better ratings. The news, the ratings in the news for those times were probably not as popular. You only had a half hour, 6 to 6:30 or 5:30 to 6 or something like that. They only had a half hour. And then you had local news in the evening for a half hour, and that was it. So there wasn't much flair about it. There wasn't much need to hype it up and make it terrific. You didn't find the best looking anchors on the news. You found them, they were in the shows and other things on TV, but they weren't your prime people now. And that all turned. I saw that turn, and when it turned when Ted Turner and his group of people in Atlanta, and they began to do, oh wow, why don't we give news 24/7 and have 4 or 5 networks? Wouldn't that be exciting? Well, I don't think it's turned out to be very exciting. I think it's turned out to be a thorn in people's side because that's when people stopped talking to each other about what they thought was going on, and they started listening to what the news said. And then the news started to be influenced by a lot of forces that probably had less influence on them in the beginning. And then here we are now, where all legacy media, all those networks, all the television stations, everything probably owned by 1 or 2 people, and those 2 people are primarily supporting what we call the oligarch society that we are now discovering has been pulling the strings for over 50 or 60 years. And it's interesting because I can now look back over those and see the strings being pulled. As we were in business and we were dealing with healthcare, excuse me, there were companies that were paying for college education. They were paying 100% of your health care to have you come work for them. Then over time is, well, let's put a little more on them. And the rationale was, if we make them pay for it, then maybe they will take care of themselves better. They won't, that also didn't pan out. We were heavier and probably not as healthy as people back 50 years ago. So this idea of putting more onto the people and keeping more into the profit center for the people who ran the companies, I saw that evolve over several decades. And of course, now we have some really great reporters that have written some books that delve back into that movement. Has been something that's been going on since the end of World War II. A small group of people wanting to control that inside the United States, primarily just for the wealth, but also to reduce the regulation, to be able to do what they wanted to do. And they hadn't been able to do that since the turn of that century, where in the early 1900s, late 1890s, and early 1900s, they went through that whole, passing laws to protect people's safety at work and not working kids under 16 years of age, and all of those laws that came about to help the worker, protect the worker against companies abusing them and using them, basically, is what it amounted to. And we began, and that's sort of what made our country at that time different from the rest of the world. It's funny because now it's almost reversed. The rest of the world is about where we were as we were going into, the 30s and 40s and 50s, when things were easier and more productive, and people were more unified, and there was an interest in working for a company. If you liked this company, you'd work for it for 50 years and you were proud to work for it. There's none of that now. There's none of that. It's all, now I'm working for I think the attitude of the youth today, and I don't know that I can blame them, is basically why? Why do I need to be dedicated to a company? What's important about that? I don't get anything extra out of it if I put extra energy into it. So why should I do that? So that's what you're getting now. That's what you're getting now. And so then you get into the battles of organizations fighting with employees about keeping them in the organization, making them come in and do the work. I think this all came to light during the COVID section, those years of the COVID period, where we really kind of discovered the importance of employees. And employees also discovered the importance of themselves to companies. We had a lot of companies that just failed during that period of time because they couldn't keep employees working. So employees realized there was some power in those numbers. And when they came back, it was, we're going to talk about working from home, balanced work life, I think was a term that I had never heard until probably this last 5 or 10 years. There was treatment. That was certainly something that people were concerned with, but it wasn't one of those situations where people were locked into the company because they liked the company. They saw the purpose of it. It was providing them something to have. When I first started, there were, I think, a point where I had the vast majority of college education for bachelor's degree covered. My expenses for that, I did that while I worked. The coverage was pretty much. I negotiated one deal that covered almost 100% of my health care coverage for a while. Then that began to dwindle, and as we began to take that away and like I said, the money was shifting to the top of the organization and less emphasis was being placed on the workforce. And here we are today. Here we are today. And you have to look at that and you say, well, we have some of the most successful companies in the whole world. Look at Amazon, look at Meta, look at Microsoft and Google, and those are all tech companies, by the way. I don't think you see many retail industries talking that language. You see some financial institutions that way. But you don't see a lot of retail. You don't see a lot of food industries that have that same, have that same level of success, if you will, that Amazon and the high tech groups have. So most of this is in the tech industry, and that's they don't employ the vast majority of people in the world. The vast majority of people in the world in the United States aren't even employed by big companies. They're employed by small businesses, multitudes of small businesses all over the country. So when you talk about where are we heading, we're beginning to lose sight of what we have had in the past and could have in the future, what we need to have in the future. And that is a unity, a sense of purpose, a sense of doing something other than for the funds that are involved in it. It still doesn't keep people from becoming billionaires, but it simply means you may not be multi-billionaires, and that you would distribute some of that down to the people. I was mentioning earlier, I was watching the Landman, which is a series on CBS, and I don't know why I'm watching CBS anymore because I'm really mad at them. But that's not Billy Bob Thornton's problem, That's not the actors, and that's not their problem. That's the executives' problems. The last show in the series, he was fired by the executive for not having the same vision as the wife had for her husband who had passed away, their future for the company. And he had gotten his son together and some of the crew that worked for him with this other company that he was fired from, and a lawyer and some of that. Anyway, the net of this is they went out and bought up some mineral rights in western Texas. If you've been out in that area, you understand that's not an easy thing to do. And those oil wells that they had purchased or had gotten leases on were hitting. They were hitting drilling wars. So he went in, got some money from a somewhat skeptical source, which sometimes happens when you're looking for money and it's not readily available, and people are doing it based on a high risk scenario. All this rings true, but the point I'm trying to make is he got those 15, 20 people that were now part of an oil company that was just formed. And the first thing he said was, we're going to take 25% of all profits and put it into an account, and that's going to go to all of the employees of the company. And that is basically unheard of in just about any oil company out there today, or any company out there today. But that's how you used to start. So it's led me to understand over my 50 years I've been in leadership in different kinds of businesses. Now, it was oil and gas was one of them, The medical was one, the food industry was one. There's some commonality about what holds companies together. One of them is the people who deliver those products and services. Another one is the leadership that hold together the people and get things to the point where the company begins to develop some sort of culture that's focused on delivering those. So there's purpose behind it. When you start a company like Billy Bob Thornton did last week, it's new, it's fresh, it's small, it's purpose driven. He isn't in it. I mean, he is in it because he wants to try to make something of it. And he knows it requires all of those people he was talking to, even though it was only like 20 of them when they first started. It requires them all. And they all are going to contribute to the success of that company. And that's the feeling you have when you start a company. I've sat in front of boards and small companies too. But and when I began to intervene as a consultant, I want a general feeling of why they feel they are in this business. Because they could get out of that business and do something else and make more money if money was the driver. That's the point I was trying to make. But I asked them a question. Why are you specifically in this business? Tell me now, and write it down on a piece of paper. Don't talk it over amongst yourself. Just when I'm done asking this question, write the first thing pops into your head. And it's astounding to me the difference between the board of directors and the executive team of a company in a meeting like that when I ask that question, the variance between them all. And we talk about that a little bit. Because when you reach a certain level, when we come in to build and change a culture or do something like that, it's a troublesome time period. The company is in existence, or they stumbled in, and they're running into a little difficulty. It's at that point, there is a point at which they get so big, their purpose has dissolved, and it's evolved into something else that is more centered on very few people. It's about making money. Satisfying shareholder equity is the term. We're in business to provide, our investors the shareholder equity they deserve for investing in us. What they fail to tell me is that when that shareholder invests in them and gives them the money, that group of executives, the C-suite team, so to speak, they get the money. It's not dawning on them, usually, that the way that money is used and going to grow to deliver their shareholder equity is by all of the people, again, delivering the product, having that excitement or that energy to take that organization and reinvent it, if you will. This is why I say I'm a leader or catalyst, to get those leaders excited about reinventing the whole thing and getting it going again, like it was when we first started. And that's when they hire McKinsey or the Big Four consulting firm to come in and help those people kind of see and regain that excitement and energy behind it. Of course, the dilemma is they've already bumped into failure just before they got this infusion of money and investment. And so the people aren't real excited anymore. They're really kind of pissed off, to be honest with you. And that's when you bring in a Vic or somebody else who specializes in working with leadership and looking at cultures and reestablishing cultures and trying to build a community, if you will, back to the organization that, again, has a sense of purpose and direction. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. And most of it depends on the leadership of that C-suite, but it also depends on the leadership throughout the organization. If that has been poisoned to the point of being repairable, it is extremely difficult to get the employees. It's virtually always possible if the middle leadership in that group, these are the people that today we're saying we don't need, where you can replace them with robots and flatten the organization. I remember them trying this in the 1990s. I don't know if anybody is doing that today who lived back in the 1990s, but the big deal was we're going to flatten the organization. We're going to give the employees a lot more authority to do the things and that they can do on their own. They can make a call on their own. They don't have to go through several layers of leadership to make this happen. And we're going to do this. And so they just arbitrarily began to cut middle management out and put and tell these employees they had the responsibility. Well, of course, the first thing some of these employees asked was, so some of that money that you're saving by cutting those guys out, is that coming to us to take on this additional responsibility? The answer was no. Oh no, that's not the purpose. You're getting more responsibility. You can, make your own decision about this. That's what you said you wanted. That's not exactly what they said they wanted, but anyway, we're still, if you go back, and let's see, that's 1990, so we're going back 15, 20 years now. And what kind of organizations do we have today? Pyramids, hierarchically structured organizations, just like we had before we went into flattening the organization. So what are we doing today? Well, we'll use robots to flatten the organization. I don't know that that's going to work either. It's a different dynamic, a different principle, a different thought process. I think they're going into it the same way they went into the 1990s. They're not thinking about it. It's just, oh, we can save money quickly. Boom, do it. There. And I remember one of my mentors, a guy I contracted with as a consultant. I just contracted out as an independent consultant. And bigger projects, I worked for somebody else as their consultant. It's just, when talking with him, he was the guy who was saying, Vic, there's a whole bunch of people who don't ask a question when they get all this put together. They just so excited about what they put together. So we kind of decided when we were doing strategy sessions on Friday afternoon at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you've been in these meetings before, if you're an executive or business person, Friday noon, I've been there for 4 days putting this strategy together. Noon, my suitcases are in the back room. We checked out of the hotel. Everything's ready to go. And we're just kind of wrapping it up this last hour or two right after lunch. And flights are that afternoon and things are great. And Vic comes in and says, this is really? You guys have really done a lot of hard work. Do you feel good about it? Yeah, we do. And I'd look at them and I'd say, okay, I just want you to do me one last favor, 20 more minutes of work. And yeah. Look, it's brainstorming work. Oh, okay, we can do the brainstorming stuff. Great. That's all I want you to do. Okay. And they go, all right, what is it? And I said, all right, so you got all your flip charts around and all that. I'll clean that up later after you leave. So you won't have to worry about it. You can get out of here. All right. Yeah. Okay. So all I want you to do is answer one question. And I want you to brainstorm. Now, I don't want you to solve it. I just want you to brainstorm all the potential from this one question. They were getting real excited and their eyes were getting bigger. And this was going to be the finale, the cap on it all. And my question is, what could fuck this whole thing up? Oh my God. It was like, boom, the whole air jumped out of them. I said, you got 20 minutes if you want to go home. So they all started working on it. And they started with the fever pitch, because they wanted to get out of there. Coming up with, I don't know, walls and walls of potential things that could screw up everything that they had spent a week planning. And this is the one thing that you don't do at the end of those really, arduous days. You don't want to say to somebody, you've planned something, but you've planned something that can be screwed up easy. And I would say probably 75% of the time, after they looked at, the people presented all of their potential problems around the room, they went back and checked in for another night. And I was there for another Saturday morning to help them work through the potential solutions to those potential problems that could screw everything up. And this is what's going on now with AI. This is what's going on with our, just look at the United States of America, a president and a Congress. And I'm not saying Republican or Democrat. If you're allowing it to happen, the whole damn Congress is responsible as far as I'm concerned. Somebody's not doing whatever it takes to make the other people stop. They're just saying, oh, we can't make it stop. They haven't figured it out. They haven't come together. They haven't did a potential problem analysis to make it work. Anyway, that's what's going on. You got a guy out there I'm going to create a war. I'm going to go in and take the president and the first lady of a country. By the way, I'll probably make Canada a state. They're not talking to anybody about this. This is just, there's no potential problem analysis for any of that anybody is presenting that I've heard over the last 2 years, or over the last year he's been in the position, or anybody has been in a position. And if you go to a hearing, I'm asking, why do we have them? As a communication expert and a consultant about communication building great organizations and great cultures, if you ask me into the hearing to give you some assessment of the hearing, I wouldn't even make it 10 minutes into one of those hearings, and I would simply say, stop, go home, get out of here. You're not solving anything. You're not solving anything. You're putting on a show for network TV or somebody or something. I don't know what it is, but you're not solving anything. So just stop it. Just stop what you're doing. Don't waste your time anymore. When you're ready to solve it, come back and let's talk about how we can put something together that will work. that has some teeth to it, that when you walk out of an hour or 5 hours or 6 or 7 hours of meeting, you have a product. And then let's do the potential problem analysis on that product to make sure we know what might screw it up and maybe see it coming and stop it before it happens. But just stop it. Just stop the whole damn thing. It was ridiculous. I can't even imagine sitting through that. I can't even imagine sitting through that. Listen to Pam Bondi was like, I would just, I worked for a guy in my early 70s called Ross Perot. He ran for president. I think the reason he couldn't be president is he would have fired everybody on the spot. No question about it. You're fired. Get out. You're not. It's not working. He definitely would have looked at Pam Bondi and said, "You're fired. Get out. That's it. You sue me, do whatever you want to do, but you're fired. You're not going to make another decision for this country." And he would look at anybody else and say, "Now, is there anybody else in here who doubts with the fact that I will fire you and send you home if you don't start performing?" That's how it would work. I remember sitting in the thing. I was struggling as a young recruiter coming out of the special forces in the military. I was a young recruiter, and he had come to Atlanta where I was recruiting in the southeastern United States. And he said, "Vic, it looks like you're struggling a little bit." I said, "Yeah, I am." His name was Ross Perot. This was EDS back in the early 70s. And I said, "Yes, sir, I was. I am." He said, "Would you like to talk about it?" I said, "Yeah, I would." And that was, wow, Ross Perot's going to sit down with me, a young fledgling recruiter in his business just coming in. And we got in the corner, and he didn't sit across from me. He just sat, like, we both sat on the corner of a meeting table, and he said, "So tell me a little bit about your problem." So I began to explain what I thought the problem was and where I was struggling and why. And he just looked at me and he goes, "Well, you can either do something about that or you can just leave." And he got up and walked out. And that was it. That was it. I was absolutely devastated. I was devastated. But he knew something about me that I didn't know about myself at that time. That self-pity was eating away at my ability to achieve what I could achieve. He knew I could achieve it. He knew what I was doing was excusing that out. And he just left. And 6 months later, I met with him in Dallas when he was building his new headquarters. We had barbecue in his house in the yard, and there were, at that time, recruiters. There were only a few of us, so we were a pretty unique group in the company. And we were having a party in his backyard with him and some of his executives and everything. And he came over at me and he said, "I see your numbers are up." And I went, "Really? You noticed that?" And he said, yeah, I did. And he said, "I knew you could do it." And it's that kind of leadership you're looking for. He wasn't going to let me fail. I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it was that I would even fail. But he knew I needed to dig deep in myself to bring this out. And sometimes we lose that coaching capability when we got locked into a system or something that we just feel like we have to sell or market to make it happen. When in reality, it was just simply telling me to get my damn act together and stop feeling sorry for myself and giving me no other alternative other than to change or just be unsuccessful. And it was my choice. He wasn't going to fire me. And I'll never forget that one piece of advice. People call that tough love. It really wasn't tough love coaching and stuff like that. It was reality. It was faith in somebody. He took a gamble. He didn't fire me on the spot, and he could have easily have fired me on the spot. Um, and then I became one of the top recruiters in EDS for that year. Um, and then left and went on and did something bigger, and I've been doing that ever since. Um, but the idea here is to understand the role that people play in your organization when you're and that normally happens when it first starts. It normally falls apart when you start deciding to go public and get other people involved in your business and investing in your business, and you're taking other money at that point. Now you're under somebody else's control. You're not controlling your business. Um, and that in some ways that works out for people like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and all them. They took that route, and they are now multi-billionaires doing all of their stuff the way they want to do it. But their people, as a percentage of the success for that company, are not seen as having as much value as, say, a Zuckerberg or a Bezos had. And that's always frustrated me in terms of organizations and why why do you want to be in leadership? Well, I want to be in leadership. Most of the time, I felt like in companies, it was a matter of it was the only source to the next step for more money. So if you were a great marketing, if you were a great salesperson, and were going to go anywhere in the company, the next level was management and leadership. And there's a big difference between management and leadership and great sales. Getting a bunch of people to make great sales is different than you being a great salesperson. And there's two different principles there. And we would put people into those positions not realizing those principles. And so over the years, you begin to see these things that work to make organizations successful. And those that could turn around, who could take and rebuild a culture and reestablish, or were driven by leaders in the organization who, and primarily leaders in the middle of the organization, down in the organization, who could get employees excited about doing this. And I always said we knew we were successful in our changes when employees were telling us that is the leader that I grant the authority to lead me. When you have that kind of feeling going on with your staff, then, I grant you the authority to lead me. I want you to lead me. I need you to lead me. When you hear those words, then you've been pretty successful in moving this down. And I didn't mean to talk about all this on this because, one, my nose is itching like crazy. And so that tells me I'm not a robot. I'm human. Yay. So I just wanted to get on to Substack Live here and see if I could do it, having no technical ability at all in my whole life. I am a consultant, obviously. I'm not a tech wizard. I'm still trying to figure out how to effectively communicate with people over the air. How can you how can you reach them? How can you stir their emotions without being there, right next to them, making them feel excited? When I first started early in my career, for those of you who want to hit a tip out of it, if you get anything, here's a tip. I started my career, I was building high performance teams. I was working in team building. Kind of natural, having spent 6 or 7 years in special forces. That's a highly effective operating team. So I had some ability and expertise in that, but not from the corporate standpoint. The people that were on my team, if they didn't do what I told them to do, they'd go to jail. They could go to jail. Disobeying an order, so to speak. It was a punishable offense. Not so much the case in a company. So when I was having these team building sessions, they were going pretty good, I thought. And so at the end of the day, this one day, at the end of the day, I left the company and there was a restaurant that had a nice little lounge and it was a good ambiance, good food, all that. And I was going to go over there. I normally would take the evening and just kind of go through my notes and get ready for the next day, but kind of assess where we were. And I have a model that I use to do that. And so I would do that over a drink and dinner. So this one day, there was this restaurant, and I went in, and they were pretty full. And I said, well, I don't want to take a four top or something like that. I'm just here by myself. So they said, well, you can eat in the bar if you want. And I said, okay. So I went in the bar, and I was sitting there. I didn't even look up. I just kind of come in, sat down, started pulling my notes out, waiting, got a drink. I like Manhattans. It says so right here on my hat. Manhattan, please. And so I was sitting there having my first Manhattan. I normally have two, and then I quit. And one before and one with dinner, and then I go. And it helps me kind of sleep at night. I don't know why, but it does. Probably nothing scientific about that. I was sitting there, and so there's a group of employees or a group of people over at the bar. I couldn't even tell they were employees at the time. Wasn't paying attention. One of them came over and said, "Hi, you remember me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you're in the team. How you doing?" They said, "Great." They said, "We'd like to come over. How do you feel about us joining you? Are you with someone, or would we be interrupting you?" And I went, "No, no, come on." I said, so there were like five of them. I think we had a total of 8 in the team. There were 5 of them. So we sit down there at the table, and this happened to be just west of the office, about 2 blocks. And they got into discussing. They said, "We'd like to talk to you, but we want to kind of set some boundaries." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "We don't want you to share anything you hear." And I said, "You're putting me in a pretty interesting dilemma here." I said, "Yeah, but And I said, "Well, if it'll help you become a team, okay, I'll honor that." And there was just an unbelievable release of honesty, and I kind of got a feeling from the assessment I did that was what was there, but that just validated it all. There was a lot of things going on, and it wasn't that they didn't like their boss, but they didn't know quite how to handle connecting with that boss, and that is the dilemma I found with so many leaders. It's not that the leader isn't proficient at their technical job of marketing or whatever it is, or even proficient at being a leader, resolving conflicts and things. but there are things about them that don't allow them to connect with the employees in a way where they uh, are trusting and feeling comfortable with them. And when I started going through and listening to them and asking a few probing questions, it began to be clear to me that it wasn't the leader's lack of skill or knowledge or experience. It was their ability to communicate and connect with them in a way that they felt comfortable and open enough to relate and get the communication flow going that they needed to get to the points they needed to get. That's what was creating their barrier. It wasn't that they couldn't be a team. It was they had problem connecting. And so, God, I went back to my room after I met with him. I said, holy crap, everything I'm doing, this isn't even heading in the right direction. So I went back the next day and I said, I'm going to at least throw something on the table. I want you to just tell me how you feel about what I'm going to say, and then let's go forward. And I said, all the things I'm about to cover here in the next 2 days that we have remaining is not going to, I don't think it's going to help you. So I need you to, right now, just kind of sit down with me and tell me what you think you need me to help you. And now I said, now, leader, I want you to come with me and I want to have a discussion with you. I want to talk to you about something that I need to get a sense of how you feel about it. And you guys work on this over here and we'll come back and meet with you. And they said, okay. So I went and sat down with this leader and I said, how comfortable do you feel about relating with your people? And it ended up the leader goes, it's funny you ask. I don't know. Lately, I just haven't been feeling like we were connecting. They're missing things, a lot of mistakes, um, a lot of unrest. And I said, yeah, I'm thinking I'm feeling that too. And I said, well, how do we deal with this? And he says, I don't know. I really don't really understand what I need to do to get to them. And so we talked about the whole emotional, and at that time it wasn't emotional intelligence because nobody had even brought that word up, even in universities. This was back in, I don't know, late 1980s, early 1990s. That didn't even start coming up until the middle of the 1990s and into the early 2000s. But we talked about that stuff, compassion and the importance of empathy and trying to understand or feel and what they are feeling and why they're feeling and how to get that done. And so, as we went through a series of discussions, I went through a series of questions. I won't go through this with you, but we came up with some of what he perceives were the strengths, obviously. I guess you could call it a SWOT kind of thing, but it wasn't SWOT. It was kind of highly specialized and personal. And we come up with some ideas and thoughts. So we're going to write them down. I says, okay, I want you to present these to your employees. So talk to me about what you want to say to them, like I am one of them. So we rehearsed that a few times. In the meantime, I went in at the break and I would sit down with the employees. So where are you guys? And they said, well, we kind of got this list of things that we need to discuss with him about that frustrate us and that would trouble us, but we don't want to hurt his feelings and we don't want him to get upset and all of that. So I said, well, this is that connection thing. Okay, so let's talk about how can we make that work? And so we discussed all of those principles and concepts a little bit. And I said, take these 2 or 3 things here I've given you. Go put together who is going to present this. Who's most likely the person he wants to listen to or hear? And you guys make that decision. And when we come back in here in about an hour or two, you're going to make that decision. He's not going to be able to say anything. He's just going to listen to you. Okay? But the rule is he's going to do the same thing with you. And then they were a little hesitant. And then they said, well, okay. We did that process. And it was astounding. The honesty and the purity of what was laid on the table relative to emotions and feelings and what was right to come together that made you feel good about discussing it. And the elimination of the fear of having a discussion that wasn't comfortable, that wasn't, it laid you bare, so to speak. And you were vulnerable. But you were okay with it because you didn't feel threatened. All of that came out. Now, keep in mind, this all began with that discussion over dinner. Okay? This is nothing that was planned in the whole. I mean, I went off script from the consulting specification, so to speak, the program we lined out we were going to do with everybody. We weren't even close to that. And when we came back and had that one big meeting, and this is a tough meeting to have, so I don't recommend people do this unless they have some background in how to do that. But that cohesion that came out of that just turned that whole team around. We didn't have to do any more team building. That was it. We were done. They were a team. You couldn't separate them if you wanted to. There was crying. There was hugging. There were all the things you weren't supposed to do in a company because, you're not supposed to touch employees. None of that. It was all together. It was all together. When I went, I think it was a week later, I was working on another project, and the CEO of the company made a trip down a few flights, which they do rarely, but he came down. He goes, "What the hell did you do?" And I went, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble." See, that's exactly how you feel when, he didn't come in and say, "I'd like to talk to you about what you did." He said, "What the hell did you do?" So I'm going, "I don't know." He goes, "I've never seen this group this good before." And is that then it was okay, I could relax, But that's the tendency leaders have is, their first statement out of their mouth is, "What the hell did you do?" I'm going, "Oh, shit." Anyway, and we talked about it. And that sold a full corporate transformation. A full corporate transformation of a major corporation, international corporation. They wanted it everywhere, as fast as we could get it rolled out, which that's in itself a different dilemma you have to deal with. But we had to go back, and then I went back with all the consultants that helped me think through that. I mean, I had some really great guys working with me next on their own projects and working. We were all working together and bouncing this off of them, and they were going, yeah, let's do this, let's do that. So I had all that talent with me working, and we put together a full program where uh, we put together the full cultural change program this guy wanted in his company. And it was phenomenal. But it began with that out of the box, not following the structured program, just honest connection. Honest connection. Not leadership skill, connection. And it's something I don't know that I see happening very much anymore. And some of it I attribute to technology because we take so much out of being able to get somebody excited about doing stuff like this. Because unless you're here with me, you don't feel it. You don't have the kinetic energy between us to feel it. Particularly if I'm constantly rubbing my nose, and that's all you see is my face, and I'm rubbing my nose. I might get away with it if I'm back away from me or something. I apologize so much for this, but I can't help it. I don't remember ever ordering this up when I was ordered up. I put my request in to be born. I don't remember ever ordering having allergies as part of that, but I have them. So that's why I don't apologize for stuff that I can't control. I apologize for having to do what I have to do to relieve it because it's not fun for you to watch. But I thought you might enjoy a few stories of real life connectivity because, my God, we are losing it. We are not doing this. Don't push people away. Don't judge people who have possibly, at least in your mind, made mistakes of judgment. Know that they might be able to change, but when you judge, you push them a farther away. That connection it keeps getting farther and farther and farther and farther away from you. The more you criticize, the more you judge. If you make fun of people, in other words, you isolate them out. And this is one of the things you can do with technology. You can find somebody in a crowd of 12,000 people, and you can interview a person who you've kind of isolated. I think this person's going to, when I ask them a question, they're not going to know the answer. They're going to give me some dumb answer that, it's going to be absolutely hilarious on television. And that's somebody's mother, it's somebody's grandmother or father or brother or cousin. It's I don't know why you would do that. Why do you make fun of people? If they're not making the right decision, I understand that frustrates you. But there are other alternatives that kind of bring us together versus isolate us from each other. And it's called connectivity, it's called connection, it's called interpersonal communication. That's what I specialize in. That's what we need to work on in this country. And I'm going to leave you with that. Have a good evening.